Hello, everyone. Welcome and welcome back. This is going to be a reading today from the perspective of Gemini. There's no extended for this reading, but if you're interested in your own extended, you can book that in the description box below. And shout out to everyone that got extendeds. So, third time's the charm, maybe 10 times the charm on this reading, because I've tried to do it 100 times and re-recorded it, and then I did another reading yesterday and wound up deleting that by accident, blah, blah, blah. So maybe that's an aspect of the reading, right? 10 times the charm or something like that. The last reading that I recorded a few minutes ago, a siren started going off towards the end of it, and it distracted me so much that I lost my train of thought and wound up stopping the video. So that I definitely think is part of the message, and here's why. So it's the idea of the siren song, right? The siren is usually something that's supposed to be somewhat seductive, right? It calls you towards the rocky shores because it's playing your song. And what happens when our GPS is tuned into something, right? We're looking for something that's in alignment with our authenticity and our truth and our integrity. But things have shown up in the past that have quote unquote played our song and led us to some rocky shores, right? So I think with all signs beyond Gemini, it's kind of created a almost like an intuition scramble or something like that, because it's like, I was tuned into this target. These were my coordinates because that's what I was looking for, and these other things showed up. So that's, again, I was just thinking in terms of like, the siren song again is supposed to be something that's quote unquote seductive, but within most of us, it's like if something does play our song, it might trigger anxiety, right? Because it's like I've played that game before, I've seen that face before, I've I've been down this road, right? So there's an aspect of that in the reading. So the three cards that I have out on the table are showing me the goal, what it is that you're trying to manifest, what needs to be negotiated with, and then the advice for moving forward and obtaining what you desire. And the energy at the bottom of the deck is telling me what the universe wants you to know your superpower is, which is coming up as the moon card, right? So the first thing I heard with this was instinct, that this has something to do with instinct, primarily because of the animals at the bottom of the card, right? It's like they are, or at least from what we understand, right? It seems like animals, plants, ourselves are governed by the cycles of the moon in some capacity, where, at least for animals, it's very, very deep subconscious kind of movement, right? It governs their migrations and their mating cycles, and for plants, it governs the growth cycles and harvest cycles. So within us, it's like it does something like that as well, right? So it's talking to me about that instinctual programming layer, and going back to the concept of the siren song, right? It's like at our core programming, it's like there's a frequency or a tune or something that we're looking for, right? We incarnated looking for something. And somehow, some way, it's almost as if something within the game was able to recognize that. And therefore, it could play your song and lead you to rocky shores, right? So that's why I was like, well, I think I need to see the other cards on the table before I really understand how this is the superpower, right? Because the superpower is talking to me about working with the subconscious mind. Not even the subconscious, but like sub, which I think they call the id layer of conscious, ID, right? Like your identification. So it's like base level programming. Everything else is built on top of that. So your superpower, Gemini, is somehow scripting at that layer of the game, right? And shout out to everybody in the collective that's watching this. We all got a little Gemini in us, right? So all of these things apply to everybody, but this is what's coming through from the Gemini perspective. So in terms of the goal that's on the table, the card that came up was the Six of Cups, right? So the goal seems to be some kind of nostalgic connection. And I'm noticing that you can't really see it on the camera, but the angle of her eyes, she's making direct eye contact with the moon. That's how it was laid out on my table. So the first thing that I heard was wishing upon the moon. So I Googled that because I wasn't sure if that was like an expression. I've heard wish upon a star, but not wish upon the moon. And it came back with a Billie Holiday song that, full disclosure, I'm not sure if I've ever heard this song before. I've probably heard it, but I can't say that I have. But the lyrics of Wish Upon the Moon are basically, and I'm just going to paraphrase because I don't remember them. Um, it's like she's trying to manifest, it's a romance song, so she's trying to manifest a lover, but she recognizes that her own imagination has limitations to it, right? That she's never experienced true love. She doesn't even have a point of reference for it, but she knows in her heart of hearts the flavor of it, what it's supposed to feel like, taste like, smell like, etc. So in this song, she's wishing upon the moon and basically giving it up to the moon and saying, I trust the process. I recognize that there doesn't really need to be any logical explanation for what happens, but I also recognize that linguistically there is a limit to my imagination, right? Like I just don't have a point of reference to actually pull this thing in. So I'm wishing upon the moon, and the lyrics she uses are, you know, can you make a rose that smells sweeter than a rose, or the silk that's softer than silk, or something like that, where it's like, again, beyond our comprehension. And I'm pretty sure this came up in a recent San reading for, I forget who it was. It was something recently where it was talking about the same idea in terms of writing a character in the story, or a story altogether that's beyond your actual point of reference, right? Where it's like, how could you write a character that's unlike any character you've ever dealt with before, right? It's like, how do you work with that? So it seems like the superpower here, again, is kind of projecting that directly into the moon, into not the moon literally, but it's talking to me again about the subconscious level of programming, right? Because all of these planets and things, I work with them as tech. That's the best word that I have to work with. Is, one of the issues I think in terms of wishing upon the moon is that we often are asking permission, right? But if you were going to your Siri, your Google, your Alexa, you wouldn't say, "Hey Alexa, do you have a moment? Are you busy? If you mind, would you? If it's okay, I don't want to be able." We would never do that, right? So it's kind of the same idea with quote unquote working with the moon, or working with these other aspects of the construct. It's tech, so you are supposed to command it, right? You're not asking for permission, you're actually giving permission, right? So what we're doing is giving permission to this subconscious level of the programming to create something that matches the flavor of this, even though we don't have the language for it, where it's basically saying, like, I trust that you'll figure out the math. I don't really need to understand how it works, because that's magic and miracles, right? Magic and miracles defies logic and explanation, but it's like logic seems to be one of the boundaries here, right? And again, it's because of, like I was saying before, the siren song, where it's like, I've played this game before, seen this face before, so it's hard to manifest because things that we wanted at one point might have been icked by something, right? And this doesn't even have to be romance, right? It could have been maybe a career path that you went down, where it's like something happened there that icked the experience, because, maybe you were really passionate about art, so you wound up working at a gallery or a museum or something like that, that, everything about it on the surface was so in alignment with what you wanted to do, but something about it just compromised your integrity simply because the people were not nice, or something about it. You know what I mean? It was just like the experience got so icked that you weren't just done with that particular job, you were done with the dream, right? That was years ago. I used to work in fashion, and I was working as a buyer for a clothing store, and it was a great gig that I just manifested my way into, landed. But it was so horrible and so toxic in terms of going into the showrooms in New York and all of that stuff. And it icked that entire thing for me, maybe in a good way, but ultimately it's like, you know that dream belonged to me. And that's what I'm seeing here, is that it's like reclaiming a dream that belonged to you, and allowing the universe to kind of bring back something that can do it on your terms without compromising anything. I often think about Joe Rogan sometimes as like an example of somebody who might have gotten where they've gotten in the game without having to sign the contract, so to speak, if you know what I'm saying. If you know, you know. And perhaps that's why the system is so upset with the success that's come that way. But I can think of like a lot of other artists that are the same way, where like there's one musician, her name is Feist, and she's somehow managed to be successful without signing the contract, basically. So she can do things on her terms, and she gets to do her music and all of that and blah blah blah, but she never had to sign the contract, if you know what I'm saying. So it's showing me that basically it's like there is a way, right? Even if your dream has been icked by something in the past, it's basically like giving that up and saying, because the Six of Cups usually talks about going back to a nostalgia that we've experienced in the past, but that's not what I'm getting from this particular reading. I'm getting like a proverbial golden age that you yourself have not actually experienced or have a true genuine point of reference for, right? Because it's almost like the idea of like dealing with emperor energy, which is coming up on the table later here, that I think a lot of us have trouble integrating with or being comfortable with emperor energy because so many of the examples of it that we've been given externally have been toxic manifestations of that, right? So it's almost like we're wired to reject it, just like we're wired to reject money because money never did anything to us, but it's like people have done things to money that have icked it, right? So it's coming down to like the same principles. And what needs to be negotiated with here is the Three of Swords, which came up in the collective reading as I was talking about. This is now my fifth ace in the game. It's the fifth element, it's the multi-pass. Once you acquire this, you are the boss effectively. It's like in order to be the emperor you really need to have this three of swords, so to speak. And it's like I guess that might actually be true, right? It's like classically how many five-star generals or whatever, it was like they had to acquire the purple heart, so to speak, in order to even qualify for like the position of the great elder. And this is beyond gender, this is just in general, right? And if that was ever even the case, right? Maybe it never was, and this is all just an illusion. But I'm just saying, as a metaphor that we've been given to work with in the game, typically that was the meritocracy, right? The idea that you could earn your position, and what we've earned, or what you've earned, Gemini, but collectively, what the collective has earned is this purple heart. And again, I'm calling it the purple heart because you can only acquire it if you were injured on the front lines of battle and if you fulfilled the contract, right? So you didn't give up, you stayed even though you were like wounded in the trenches, you still kept fighting. You know what I'm saying? And going back to the idea of the siren song and icking the nostalgia, right? It's like the trenches probably looked like this from the outside. I think that that was us for all of us. It's like, if you've ever heard of the concept of the hell mouth, right? The thing that leads you into hell, that comes from ancient interactions with whales, right? Imagine being in a little rinky dink fishing boat back in 1000 BC. Again, if it was even real, who knows? I don't care. But we're using the metaphor. You're in a rinky dink fishing boat, and all of a sudden, this great beast from underneath the water, just all you see is a mouth, right? Just this giant mouth opens and swallows things whole. And that was where the visual of the Hellmouth or the Leviathan or whatever came from, allegedly. And there's a poem, I forget who it was, but it talks about this whale mouth, hellmouth thing. And the idea is that before the whale does its feeding, it's like it releases a perfume from its mouth that attracts all of the krill or the fish that it's seeking. So they all come in because it's like, ooh, what is this delicious perfume? And then the hell mouth opens, the whale mouth opens and swallows them whole. And then it's the story of Jonah, right? So the proverb of Jonah and the whale is that he was technically trying to run away from his destiny. The whale swallowed him and then spat him up on the shores of his destiny, right? So I think we're all in some sort of situation like that now, where it's like, the perfume was the siren song, whatever it was that you were kind of programmed to move towards. It wound up being the trenches, the front lines, but we earned the purple heart, but now we're out of that scenario. So now it's kind of like, okay, so I'm good, but everything that I thought was good in the past led me, here, and that hurts. So what do I even want? So this is about kind of giving it up to the subconscious mind and saying like, okay, I recognize that there might be a limit to my manifestation, or excuse me, my imagination. So beyond language, the feeling of what I want is authenticity and truth and all of these things. And just, again, like giving permission to the system to allow something to come in that defies your current limit of logic or explanation or imagination or anything like that. It's basically like, yeah, it's almost like giving it, well, I wouldn't even say giving creative license. It's about giving permission, right? And I'm saying that because the emperor is coming up as the advice, and the emperor is the one that gives commission and commands and commission, interesting, gives permission and commands and directs, right? So typically 9 times out of 10 we seem to outsource our emperor energy to other things, because we are kind of, not that we absolutely are uncomfortable with it, but because, like I was saying, we've been given so many toxic examples of it that it's a hard archetype to integrate sometimes. Because going back to the idea of working with the moon, right? That it's like, if we don't have, it's like the expression, I know what I don't want, but I don't know what I want, right? It's something like that, where it's like, when it comes to the emperor, a lot of us might know what we don't want, but we're not sure what we want. I would say, though, since in like the last couple of months, year, I have had a lot of examples show up in my inner circle, and I was always very lucky to have, decent loving parents and things like that too. So it's different than that, but it's like, most of my toxic emperors showed up as bosses. So you find it where you find it. But the gatekeeper is always there, right? And then a lot of them are on TV, right? A lot of them are just given to us by pop culture, and they become the emperor. So ultimately, what I'm saying here is that we tend to outsource this, so we see ourselves as lacking it, right? So what we're looking for is the supplement versus the complement, right? If we're complete, we manifest the complement. If we're incomplete, then we manifest the supplement. When the supplement shows up, they show up with the emperor energy and nothing else, right? So smash that like if the emperor has shown up, but nothing else, right? So when you see yourself as complete, containing both the emperor, the empress, the magician, the hermit, the moon, all of it, then that's how we can kind of manifest something complete. But it's also coming back to the idea of not asking for permission, but giving permission, right? So maybe that's the opposite of commanding, right? We're not commanding, we're giving permission. Specifically to the algorithm, to the moon, to the Siri, to the Alexa. We're not saying, hey, Alexa, do you have a minute? We're saying, Alexa, I'm ready for my Six of Cups, that and I'm ready for a Six of Cups that defies the limit of my imagination, because I realize that there's a linguistic cap on what it is that I can create here. And I'm letting you give me a dealer's choice, if you want to call it that. So Gemini, that's what I got for you. I realized I didn't pull an oracle card, so I'll at least pull one. Oh, here it says, I'm capable. Yes. Obstacles are only as large as I believe them to be. Okay. I can achieve anything I desire with comfort and ease, right? So that's basically, again, going back to the idea of like, it's all about giving permission to the system for it to happen, right? Like the pronoia, everything is working for you as opposed to against you. I have all the necessary tools to reach my goals, which we do. When I lead with positivity and love, helpful people show up to aid my endeavors. I am capable. So maybe that's really also what you're looking for, right? Because take it as it resonates. Partnership does not mean romance sometimes. Maybe you have that, but you just want more friends, or you want collaborators for a particular dream that you have, or whatever it is. But it's like, in order for, let's call them divine counterparts on any level, in order for divine counterparts to show up, it's almost like you need to believe that they actually exist, even if you've never experienced it, right? So that's kind of, again, this moon, where it's like, I'm giving it up, dealer's choice. There's a limit to my imagination. I know that it's possible. These are like the flavors of energy and experience that I'm looking for. Go crazy, go ham, right? And that's that on that. Gemini, I love y'all. I also feel compelled to tell you, I don't know if it was Google or Microsoft or somebody, but there's a new AI called Gemini, right? So that's funny, right? I was talking about Alexa and Siri and all of these things. So it's almost like an affirmation from the universe that it's like they wish they were you, kind of a thing. What they're trying to create is the new Gemini, but they just can't. So yeah, put that feather in your cap because you deserve it. I love you all, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.